stop, then you keep right on going and bring those cowboys back, you understand?
They didn't just cut the film, they gutted it. What started as a sprawling Western epic about freedom and friendship ended up in a studio vault, slashed to pieces without the director's permission. One actor walked off set, another refused to reshoot. And the composer? He wrote a score so beautiful, the studio buried it for decades. These are 20 weird facts about the Wild Rovers. And the bonus? Blake Edwards never forgave them. Saddle up. This one rides straight into heartbreak. Number 1. Blake Edwards didn't want to make a Western. He was known for comedies, The Pink Panther, Breakfast at Tiffany's, lighter fare that made audiences smile. But in 1970, something shifted. He'd been reading about aging cowboys, men who'd spent their lives working for nothing, watching the world change around them while they stayed stuck. It hit him hard. He started writing, not a comedy, not a farce, but something quiet and desperate. A story about two ranch hands who realize they're running out of time. Ross Bodine and Frank Post weren't heroes. They were failures, trying one last desperate move to feel alive. Edwards poured himself into the script, drawing from his own frustrations with the Hollywood system, with aging, with feeling trapped. He wanted to make something raw, something that didn't follow the Western formula. No gunfights for glory, no heroic last stands, just two men chasing a dream they'd never catch. When he finished the screenplay, he didn't pitch it as a crowd pleaser, he pitched it as the truth. MGM read it, didn't fully understand it, but greenlit it anyway because Blake Edwards' name still carried weight. They had no idea what they were actually buying. A film that would break the director's heart and nearly end his career. Number 2. William Holden wasn't the first choice to play Ross Bodine. Edwards wanted someone grittier, someone who looked like they'd spent decades under the sun breaking horses and mending fences. He approached Lee Marvin first. Marvin read the script, loved it, and agreed to do it. But then, scheduling conflicts arose. Marvin was committed to another Western, and he couldn't make both work. Edwards panicked. He needed someone with presence, someone who could carry regret in their eyes without saying a word. Enter William Holden. At 53, Holden was past his golden boy years. His face had weathered, his voice had deepened. He'd lived hard, drank harder, and it showed. But that's exactly what Edwards needed. Holden brought gravity to Ross, a quiet sadness that made you believe this was a man who'd wasted his life and knew it. He didn't just play a cowboy. He played a ghost of what could have been. And when the cameras rolled, Holden disappeared into the role so completely that even the crew felt the weight of it. He wasn't acting, he was confessing. And that rawness became the soul of the film. Without Holden, the Wild Rovers would have been just another Western. With him, it became something haunting. Number 3. Ryan.
Ryan O'Neal.
O'Neal was cast as Frank Post, the young dreamer who convinces Ross to rob a bank and run for Mexico. But O'Neal almost quit before filming even started. He'd just come off Love Story, a massive romantic hit that made him a household name. His agents wanted him in more love stories, more safe bets. They told him the Wild Rovers was career suicide, a slow Western with no romance, no blockbuster appeal, just two men riding into nowhere. O'Neal ignored them. He wanted to work with Blake Edwards. He wanted to stretch beyond the pretty boy roles. But when he arrived on location in Arizona, he realized just how hard it would be. The shoot was grueling, long days in the desert heat, minimal dialogue scenes, horses that didn't cooperate, and Holden, a seasoned pro, who didn't coddle the young star. O'Neal struggled. He felt out of place. He almost called his agent to pull him out. But then something clicked. He stopped trying to act and started listening to Holden, watching how he moved, how he stayed quiet between takes. O'Neal learned stillness, and in doing so, he gave the performance of his early career. Not flashy, not loud, just honest. A kid chasing a fantasy he'd never reach. By the end, O'Neal wasn't just glad he stayed, he was proud. Number 4. The film's opening scene, a quiet moment of Ross staring at the horizon, almost didn't exist. Blake Edwards shot it on a whim during the first week of production. It wasn't in the script, it wasn't storyboarded. Edwards just woke up one morning, saw the light breaking over the desert, and told the crew to set up. Holden didn't even know what the scene was about. Edwards told him, just stand there and think about everything you've lost. No dialogue, no action, just a man, a landscape, and silence. The crew thought it was a waste of film. The studio later called it indulgent. But Edwards knew what he was doing. That single shot set the tone for the entire movie. It told you this wasn't going to be a shootout spectacle. This was about loneliness, about men who'd been forgotten by the world. When test audiences saw it, some were bored, others were transfixed. Critics later called it one of the most beautiful openings in any Western. But MGM, they hated it. And when they got their hands on the film, that shot was one of the first things they considered cutting. Edwards fought to keep it, barely. That quiet moment, born from instinct, became the heartbeat of a film the studio never understood. Number 5. The robbery scene wasn't supposed to be violent. In the original script, Ross and Frank slip into the bank, take the money, and leave without a shot fired. Clean, simple, almost anticlimactic. But during rehearsals, Edwards changed his mind. He realized the scene needed tension, not because the heist itself mattered, but because it had to show these men were amateurs. So he rewrote it on the spot. The robbery became chaotic. Ross fumbles with his gun. Frank panics when the banker reaches for something. A shot goes off accidentally. Suddenly they're running, terrified, not triumphant. It wasn't a cool Western robbery. It was a disaster. And that's exactly what Edwards wanted. He wanted you to see these weren't outlaws. They were desperate men in over their heads. Holden and O'Neill rehearsed the new version only twice before filming. The chaos you see on screen is real uncertainty. They're not playing cool, they're playing scared. And when the studio saw the scene, they complained it wasn't exciting enough. They wanted more action, more heroics. Edwards refused. He told them, "This isn't a hero story, it's a tragedy." They didn't listen. And later, when they recut the film, they tried to speed up the robbery, adding music, tightening the edit. But even butchered, the scene still carried Edwards' original intent. Two men who had no business robbing a bank, proving it with every panicked breath. Number 6.
Out and discover just how uncertain life really is.
The bond between Holden and O'Neill wasn't instant. In fact, for the first 2 weeks of shooting, they barely spoke off camera. Holden was old school, a veteran who'd worked with legends like Billy Wilder and Sam Peckinpah. He showed up on time, knew his lines, and kept to himself. O'Neill was younger, more casual, still figuring out his process. The age gap and different approaches created a quiet tension on set. But then one night, after a long day in the Arizona desert, Holden invited O'Neill to his trailer. They shared a bottle of whiskey. Holden started telling stories about the old Hollywood, about the directors he'd fought with, the roles he'd turned down, the regrets that kept him up at night. O'Neill just listened, and in that conversation, something shifted. They weren't just co-stars anymore. They were Ross and Frank, an older man passing down hard-earned wisdom to a younger one who still believed things could be different. From that night on, their scenes had a deeper authenticity. The quiet looks, the unspoken understanding. It wasn't just acting, it was real connection. Blake Edwards noticed it immediately. He started giving them more room to improvise, to just exist together on screen. And the result was a friendship that felt lived in, worn, and tragically doomed. The chemistry wasn't manufactured, it was earned, one bottle of whiskey at a time. Number 7. Jerry Goldsmith composed one of the most beautiful scores of his career for the Wild Rovers. Sweeping, melancholic, full of longing. He used a solo harmonica to represent freedom, strings to represent loss, and wove them together in a way that made the landscape feel alive. Edwards was moved to tears when he first heard it. The music didn't just accompany the film, it elevated it. But then, MGM stepped in. After the studio recut the film without Edwards' approval, they decided Goldsmith's score was too sad, too slow, too unmarketable. They wanted something more upbeat, more commercial. So, they hired another composer to write additional cues, peppier moments that didn't fit the tone at all. Goldsmith was furious. He demanded his name be removed from the theatrical cut. MGM refused. The butchered version went to theaters with a Frankenstein score, part Goldsmith's brilliance, part studio-mandated garbage. For years, Goldsmith's original score was lost, locked away in MGM's vaults. It wasn't until decades later, when a director's cut movement began, that the full score was restored. And when audiences finally heard it the way Goldsmith intended, they understood what had been stolen. A masterpiece reduced to background noise. all because a studio thought sadness didn't sell. Number 8. Blake Edwards fought for the ending. In the original script, Ross and Frank die in a shootout with lawmen. It's inevitable, tragic, and honest. They never make it to Mexico. They never find freedom. The dream dies with them. But MGM hated it. Test audiences in 1971 didn't want downbeat westerns. They wanted triumph, escape, hope. Studio executives pushed Edwards to change the ending, to let the cowboys ride off into the sunset, to give audiences something to cheer for. Edwards refused. He told them, if they live, the whole movie is a lie. Meetings turned into shouting matches. Executives threatened to take the film away from him. Edwards stood his ground. He recut scenes, restructured moments, anything to make the ending land with more emotional weight. But he would not let them live. In the end, MGM gave in, but only because they planned to recut the entire film anyway. When the theatrical version was released, the ending remained. Ross and Frank die. The dream dies. But everything leading up to it had been chopped to pieces, making the ending feel rushed instead of earned. Edwards was devastated. The one thing he'd protected had been undermined by everything they'd destroyed before it. The ending survived, but the journey to it didn't. Number 9. The final shootout wasn't a shootout at all. Edwards deliberately staged it to be anticlimactic. No slow-motion heroics, no dramatic music swells, no last words of defiance. Just two exhausted men who realize too late they're surrounded. They raise their guns. The lawmen fire. It's over in seconds. Edwards wanted it to feel sudden, unfair, and small, because that's what death is. The crew was confused. The stunt coordinator expected a big choreographed sequence. The actors prepared for an intense final scene, but Edwards told them, there's nothing glorious about this. They just die. Holden and O'Neill rehearsed it once. When they filmed it, Edwards called cut after one take. That was it. No coverage, no alternate angles. Just one brutal, quick, and honest ending. When MGM executives saw it, they called it a letdown. They wanted more shots, more drama, more spectacle. Edwards refused to reshoot. He told them, you wanted them dead. They're dead. That's all you get. The studio couldn't force him to film something that didn't exist. So, the ending stayed, blunt and devastating. And years later, critics would call it one of the most honest death scenes in Western cinema. Not because it was dramatic, because it wasn't. Number 10. The Wild Rovers wasn't just cut, it was mutilated. Blake Edwards delivered a 136-minute director's cut to MGM. He'd spent months in the editing room, shaping every scene, every pause, every moment of silence. He believed it was his best work. MGM watched it and panicked. Too slow, they said. Too sad. Too long. Without consulting Edwards, they took the film away from him and handed it to their own editors. They cut 27 minutes. Gone were character moments, quiet scenes, the breathing room that made the film work. They tightened pacing, removed unnecessary dialogue, and stripped away the very soul Edwards had crafted. When Edwards saw the theatrical cut, he walked out of the screening room and didn't speak for hours. He later said it was the most painful moment of his career. The film he'd poured his heart into had been reduced to a shadow of itself. He demanded his name be removed. MGM refused. The butchered version hit theaters in 1971, confused critics, and died at the box office. Audiences didn't understand what they were watching. A Western that felt incomplete, rushed, emotionally hollow. Edwards was blamed for the failure. His reputation took a hit. And for decades, the Wild Rovers was remembered as a misfire, a mistake. But it wasn't Edwards who failed. It was the studio that killed it, and he never forgot. Number 11.
Carl Malden in Wild Rovers.
Hey, where are we gonna get us another horse?
Carl Malden played the rancher Paul Buckman, the man Ross and Frank work for before they decide to rob and run. But Malden almost walked off the set after the first week. He'd signed on expecting a traditional Western with clear villains and heroes. When he arrived and read the full script, he realized his character wasn't a villain at all. Buckman was just a businessman, neither cruel nor kind, just indifferent to the men who worked for him. Malden felt the role had no arc, no purpose. He confronted Edwards in his trailer, demanding rewrites, more scenes, something to justify his presence. Edwards listened quietly, then told him, "You're not supposed to be important. That's the point. These men work their whole lives for people who don't even see them. Malden was furious. He felt wasted, reduced to a footnote. But Edwards wouldn't budge. He explained that Buckman's indifference was the catalyst for everything. Ross and Frank don't rob the bank because they hate their boss. They rob it because they realize he'll never care whether they live or die. That realization hit Malden hard. He stopped complaining and leaned into the emptiness of the role. He played Buckman as a man who barely registers the people around him, and it worked. His detachment made Ross and Frank's desperation even more heartbreaking. Sometimes the smallest roles carry the biggest truths. Number 12. The horses were a nightmare. Blake Edwards wanted authenticity, so he insisted on using real working ranch horses instead of trained Hollywood animals. It was a disaster from day one. These horses weren't used to cameras, lights, or the chaos of a film set. They bucked, they bolted, they refused to hit their marks. During one scene where Ross and Frank ride out at dawn, Ryan O'Neal's horse spooked and threw him off. O'Neal landed hard, bruised his ribs, and spent the next 3 days barely able to move. The medic wanted to shut down production. O'Neal refused. He got back on the horse, wincing through every take, because he didn't want to slow Edwards down. Holden's horse was worse, a temperamental mare that bit crew members and kicked at anyone who got too close. Holden, a seasoned rider, tried to calm her with patience and treats. Nothing worked. Finally, he told Edwards, "Either this horse goes, or I do." They swapped her out for a gelding, and filming continued. But the damage was done. The horse scenes took twice as long as planned, blew through the budget, and left the cast bruised and exhausted. Edwards later admitted it was a mistake. He'd wanted realism, but he got chaos. Still, those wild, unpredictable moments made it to the screen. The horses felt untamed because they were, and somehow, that added to the film's raw, unpolished soul. Number 13. There was a love scene that never made it to any version of the film. In Edwards' original script, Ross has a brief encounter with a woman in a small town saloon. She's a widow, lonely, and they share one night together before he leaves forever. It wasn't gratuitous. It was about two people finding warmth in a cold world, knowing it wouldn't last. Edwards cast a relatively unknown actress and filmed the scene with sensitivity and restraint. Just two bodies seeking comfort, nothing exploitative. But when MGM saw the dailies, they had a meltdown. A 53-year-old Holden in a romantic scene? They called it unsexy, uncomfortable, unmarketable. They demanded Edwards cut it immediately. He refused. He argued the scene showed Ross was still human, still capable of connection, still searching for something more than the emptiness of ranch life. The studio didn't care. They told him if he didn't cut it, they'd do it for him. Edwards tried to compromise, offering to trim it down, to make it shorter, subtler. MGM said no. Remove it entirely. In the end, Edwards was forced to comply, but only after threatening to quit. The scene was removed from his director's cut before MGM even got their hands on it, and with it went one of the last pieces of hope in Ross's life. The woman was paid, thanked, and never appeared in the film. Her scenes vanished into the vault, and Ross became even more isolated, even more doomed. Number 14.
Stop, then you keep right on going and bring those cowboys back, you understand?
Tom Skerritt had a small but crucial role as one of the pursuing lawmen. He wasn't supposed to be in the film at all. Edwards had cast another actor, someone more weathered and experienced. But 2 weeks before shooting began, that actor suffered a heart attack and had to drop out. Skerritt was called in as a last-minute replacement. He arrived on set with no rehearsal time, no chemistry reads, and barely an understanding of who his character was supposed to be. Edwards told him, "You're the law. You're not evil. You're just doing your job. And that job is to kill two men." Skerritt nodded and asked, "Do I feel bad about it?" Edwards smiled. "I don't know. Do you?" That ambiguity stayed with Skerritt throughout filming. He played the lawman as neither hero nor villain, just a man following orders, tracking two strangers across the desert. In the final shootout, Skerritt's character is the one who fires the fatal shots. Edwards wanted to film Skerritt's reaction after Ross and Frank fall, a moment of regret, of questioning. They set up the shot, framed Skerritt's face, and rolled cameras. But Skerritt couldn't do it. He tried 3 takes, and each time, he just stared blankly. Edwards asked what was wrong. Skerritt said, "I don't think he feels anything. He's just relieved it's over." Edwards kept the blank stare. No remorse, no triumph. Just a man who'd done his job and wanted to go home. Sometimes the most honest performances come from not knowing the answer. Number 15. The cinematographer Philip Lathrop clashed with Blake Edwards constantly. Lathrop had shot The Pink Panther and other Edwards comedies, so he expected a lighter touch. But The Wild Rovers was different. Edwards wanted shadows, dust, and harsh sunlight. He wanted the desert to feel oppressive, not beautiful. Lathrop disagreed. He wanted sweeping vistas, golden hour magic, the classic Western look. For weeks they battled over every setup. Edwards would demand a tight, claustrophobic frame. Lathrop would argue for something wider, more cinematic. They'd yell, compromise, then yell again the next day. The crew dreaded their morning meetings because it always started with tension. But something strange happened. The conflict produced incredible images. Scenes that shouldn't have worked, compositions that felt off balance and unsettling became the film's visual signature. The West didn't look romantic. It looked unforgiving. And that was because neither man fully got what they wanted. They met somewhere in the middle, in a place that felt raw and uncomfortable. Years later, Lathrop admitted Edwards was right. The beauty would have betrayed the story. But at the time, he hated every second of the shoot. Edwards, for his part, called Lathrop one of the most talented and stubborn artists he'd ever worked with. And in the end, their war created something neither could have achieved alone. A West that felt real, lived in, and utterly without mercy. Number 16. Blake Edwards' marriage to Julie Andrews was falling apart during production. They had been together for years, but the pressures of Hollywood, of constant work, of creative differences had taken their toll. Edwards poured his personal pain into The Wild Rovers. Ross's loneliness, his sense of wasted time, his desperate need to escape before it was too late, all of it came from Edwards' own life. He was shooting in the Arizona desert, hundreds of miles from home, barely speaking to Andrews on the phone. Some nights, he'd sit alone in his trailer and rewrite scenes, making them darker, sadder, more final. The crew noticed. Holden noticed. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Holden found Edwards sitting by himself staring at the mountains. Holden sat down next to him and didn't say anything for a long time. Finally, Edwards said, "I think I'm making a film about dying." Holden nodded. "I know." They sat there in silence until the sun went down. Edwards never talked about his marriage on set, but everyone knew. The film became his therapy, his confession, his way of processing what he was losing. And when MGM took the film away from him and cut it to pieces, it wasn't just a professional betrayal. It was personal. They'd taken his pain and made it meaningless. Years later, Edwards would reconcile with Andrews and find happiness. But The Wild Rovers remained a monument to one of the darkest periods of his life. A film about men who run out of time, made by a man who thought he had. Number 17. The Mexican town sequences were supposed to be the film's emotional peak. Ross and Frank finally make it across the border, finally taste freedom. But it's hollow. The money doesn't matter. The escape feels empty. Edwards wanted to show that running away doesn't solve anything. It just postpones the reckoning. He spent weeks location scouting in Mexico, finding the perfect dusty village with crumbling buildings and endless sky. He brought the cast down, set up shots, prepared to film. And then the Mexican government stepped in. They'd granted the production permits, but local officials suddenly demanded more money, more control, more everything. Edwards refused to be extorted. He pulled the entire production back across the border and rebuilt the Mexican town on a ranch in Arizona. It cost more money and more time, but he wouldn't compromise. The rebuilt town looked perfect, indistinguishable from the real thing. But Edwards knew the difference. He'd lost something in the translation, some authenticity he could never get back. The scenes in Mexico were shot quickly, almost rushed, because the budget was bleeding and the studio was getting nervous. What should have been the film's turning point became just another location. Audiences never knew the struggle behind it. They just saw two men in a dusty town, realizing freedom doesn't exist. Edwards saw two men in a fake town that represented every compromise he'd been forced to make. And the irony wasn't lost on him. Even in fiction, you can't escape. Number 18.
William Holden and Ryan O'Neal are.
When The Wild Rovers premiered in 1971, Blake Edwards refused to attend. He told MGM to take his name off the marketing, to not mention him in interviews, to pretend he didn't exist. They refused, of course. His name sold tickets. So Edwards stayed home the night of the premiere, sitting alone in his house, refusing to watch what they'd done to his film. Reviews were mixed to negative. Critics called it slow, aimless, a Western without purpose. Roger Ebert wrote that it felt like a film searching for its own reason to exist. Audiences stayed away. The box office was disastrous. MGM blamed Edwards. They said he delivered an unmarketable product, a depressing slog that no one wanted to see. Edwards didn't defend himself. He was too broken to fight anymore. For years, the Wild Rovers was considered a failure, a misstep in Edwards' career between the Pink Panther films. Film schools didn't teach it. Repertory theaters didn't show it. It faded into obscurity, remembered only by the people who made it and a handful of die-hard Western fans who sensed something deeper beneath the studio's butchery. But Edwards never forgot. He kept his director's cut, all 136 minutes, locked away. He told friends that one day, people would see what he'd actually made. One day they'd understand. It took decades, but he was right. When archivists finally restored his original vision in the early 2000s, critics who'd dismissed it in 1971 came back and apologized. The film they'd called aimless was revealed as deliberate, meditative, heartbreaking. Edwards didn't live to see the full vindication, but his film did. Number 19. Ryan O'Neal carried guilt about the Wild Rovers for years. After it flopped, his agents told him, "See, we warned you." He went back to safer roles, commercial films, crowd pleasers, but he never forgot the experience of making it, of working with Holden, of learning what real acting could be. In interviews decades later, O'Neal would bring up the Wild Rovers unprompted, talking about how it was one of the few times he'd done something that mattered. Something that wasn't just empty entertainment. He'd say, "We made something real, and they destroyed it." He tried to reconnect with Blake Edwards multiple times over the years, to apologize for not fighting harder, for not standing up to the studio. Edwards always told him the same thing. "You did your job. You were perfect. This wasn't your fight." But O'Neal never fully believed it. He felt complicit in the failure, even though he had no power to stop it. In 2009, when Edwards passed away, O'Neal attended the funeral. He brought a photograph from the set of the Wild Rovers, a candid shot of him and Holden on horseback, both laughing at something off camera. He placed it on Edwards' casket and whispered, "You were right about everything." The other mourners didn't understand, but the people who'd made the Wild Rovers, the ones still alive, they knew. It was an apology, a goodbye, and a promise to never forget what they'd made together, even if the world had. Number 20. The Wild Rovers has become a cult classic among filmmakers, not audiences. Directors like Paul Thomas Anderson, Kelly Reichardt, and the Coen brothers have cited it as an influence, particularly Edwards' director's cut. They point to its refusal to glorify the West, its quiet pacing, its willingness to let characters exist without constant action. The film doesn't explain everything. It doesn't tie up loose ends. It just observes two men making a doomed choice and follows them to the inevitable conclusion. For modern filmmakers tired of formula, The Wild Rovers is a masterclass in restraint, but it remains largely unknown to general audiences. It's never had a big Blu-ray release, never been featured on major streaming platforms. You have to search for it, hunt it down in archives and specialty collections. And maybe that's fitting. A film about forgotten men, forgotten by the culture that created it. Blake Edwards made The Wild Rovers because he had to, because it meant something to him personally. He didn't make it for awards or box office. He made it to prove he could tell a story that mattered, that didn't pander, that respected the audience's intelligence. The studio took it away, the audience rejected it, and Edwards moved on, making comedies and crowd pleasers because that's what paid the bills. But The Wild Rovers remained, a ghost in his filmography. A reminder that sometimes the films that mean the most are the ones the world refuses to see. Bonus fact, there's a deleted scene that's never been restored, even in the director's cut. A moment where Ross and Frank sit by a campfire the night before the robbery, and Ross tells Frank about a woman he loved when he was young, how he was too afraid to ask her to wait for him, how she married someone else, how he spent his whole life wondering what would have happened if he'd just been brave enough to try. Frank listens, then asks, "Is that why we're doing this? Because you're still trying to be brave?" Ross doesn't answer. He just stares into the fire. The scene was cut because Edwards felt it explained too much, made Ross's motivations too clear. He wanted ambiguity, wanted audiences to wonder why these men were really running. But the scene was shot, and it's heartbreaking. William Holden's delivery is quiet, vulnerable, stripped of all pretense. It's the kind of acting that reminds you why he was a star. The footage exists somewhere in MGM's archives, but it's never been included in any release. Edwards took it out himself, believing the film was stronger without it. And maybe he was right, but those who've seen it, the archivists and restoration experts, they say it's one of the most beautiful scenes Holden ever filmed. A moment of pure honesty in a film built on unspoken regret, hidden away, just like the men it portrays.